Hi, I'm Luther Kruger, Big Blue Sun Museum based in Minneapolis. I'm here with Carla Ramsdell in beautiful Appalachian State University campus. I don't know that you can get any more beautiful than this. Semi-beautiful day weather-wise.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll take what we can get.
Yeah. Well, hopefully those clouds, it looks like they're starting to part. So, but anyway, Carla's going to talk about how she uses solar cooking in her physics and education piece here at the university. Which is fantastic because I just got back from Ohio where we talked about more or less the secondary school education piece with Mary and Jennifer, Solar Education Project. So, but before getting deep into that, just a quick summary, how did you get into solar energy, especially for solar cooking? When did it all start?
Right. Okay, so it's I guess a non-linear path, but my undergrad is in physics, my master's is mechanical engineering, and I worked in the energy sector for a long time. So I worked for Westinghouse, who Siemens bought eventually, became Siemens Westinghouse as a thermodynamic design and test engineer of power plant equipment. So on the thermal side of things, though, so really solidly a thermal design. Worked a little bit in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning as an engineer also, and then sort of started my second career in higher education. So came to Appalachian State in 2008. Love teaching, really found something that really, I think, suits me well. I love working with students. It's just a fantastic job. So then started teaching energy. Seemed to make sense. That was my background. So I developed a course on the physics of energy and sustainability. And I'm also Italian, right? So it's hard not to incorporate food into a lot of what I do. Yeah, food was a huge part of my childhood and a long lineage of people who are amazing chefs. And so I started just questioning myself, the thermodynamics of cooking, and then bringing little chunks of that into the classroom. And students just loved it, right? The engagement of the students was very noticeable. And so then I kept moving down that road, and I'm, a sustainable advocate, really, and concerned about climate change and literacy, and so started to research food and how it intersected with climate change, and realized it was this huge factor which 8 years ago really wasn't being discussed much. So I went full in, sort of cradle to grave food system from an energy lens. So if you're researching the energy of the food system, including cooking, trying to do things as efficiently as possible, solar ovens are just kind of a really natural step, right?
Sure.
Why not just use the sun? So started out just curious, wonder if these things really work. Got a couple. I feel really fortunate to be here at Appalachian State University, which is like sustainability is just in the DNA of this place. Everything we do, it's woven into so much. And so I've had the support all along, my department specifically. I work in the physics and astronomy department. I don't know that every department chair, if I walked in the office and said I want to teach a course on the sustainability of food and cooking, would be quite as enthusiastic as my department's been. They've supported me, and so little by little purchased some ovens, realized they really do work pretty great, and so then started incorporating them in the classroom. Again, students, they're just so interesting, right? I mean, people just are drawn to these because they're so different. And so it became, at the beginning, a tool to start a talk about heat transfer, for example. Like, well, we're talking about the 3 modes of heat transfer. Let me bring an evacuated tube in because it's kind of a rock star there. And then, little by little, well, you know it well. You beat me on solar ovens for sure. But I think I'm up to 17 now. So little by little, you just see a new one, and the physics is really cool, and the law of reflection. I mean, there's just so much physics baked into these, no pun intended.
We might have to work out a trade sometime. If I got a duplicate of one. And
we could... Sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, sounds great. That's for sure.
Yeah. What was the first cooker that you worked with?
I actually think a sun oven was the first one.
Sure.
The box cooker was the first one I got, and works pretty reliably.
It's hard not to miss that one. It's all over.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's a workhorse. It does the job.
It does until the clouds, so I think it's great because you can put big things in it, and that's, it's easy for students to manage also. Then I got an evacuate. I guess the Sport was probably the next one. Sure. And then, just kind of kept rolling, doing a little research project currently with some students about using evacuated tubes for solar water pasteurization in countries that don't have reliable clean water. So still in the process of that. So
Sure. And for the classes, how have you wedge them into your classroom work?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the course. So I teach just a general physics series. So there, when we get to heat transfer, it's just a pretty natural, thing to bring. I bring in the whole cart. People are really engaged. I end class a little early so students can come up and touch and feel. And I do some demos on campus too. On a sunny day, I'll bake some cookies or something. My energy and sustainability class, I've really found that especially something like the fusion, which actually, can I go ahead and load some granola in here?
Yes.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we got some clouds, but
okay.
fusion it's a hybrid oven, so I've actually plugged the battery pack in. It's been heating for a while, so I imagine it's about 170 degrees or so. Right? So I just pre-made a little granola. Get it out of here. We will be doing good. That's going to come out all around. Okay, maybe a spoon would be a good choice. There we go. Okay, perfect. Just a little oats and oil and some sugar and some cinnamon. Pretty cool. I'm going to leave it cracked a bit because we're all about sort of drying it out. So
sure.
I want it to just sort of. So we'll let that
good tip.
Let that do its magic while we're talking. So I think the cool thing about incorporating into a class like that, where I'm teaching, it's a gen ed course. It's intended for everybody, and I think the one thing I've learned is that it's an oven like this helps to open a conversation about the broader renewable energy scheme,
sure.
right? So I think what happens often is that it happens with solar ovens, with electric vehicles, with our electric grid. We get to this point where we're kind of nervous if renewables are going to do everything for us, right? And so let's take the solar oven. We're not sure the sun's going to do the whole job, right?
Sure.
So what we've done, I think, historically, is we just keep going down the road of our traditional methods because we're afraid this isn't going to do everything. And then we sprinkle in some renewables, right? So we look at electric vehicles, we look at our electric grid. We're not sure we can get there with all renewable. So what we're going to do is just keep building fossil fuel plants and throw a couple high wind turbines and solar panels in the background. Where I think the mentality should shift, where we should say, we're not sure we're going to get all the way there, but why don't we go all in? Let's do all renewable and sprinkle in the fossil fuel stuff if we don't quite get there, right? And so I think the fusion opens that conversation for students because I say, look, this is great. It's a solar oven. Perfect example.
Sure.
Today, we're not going to get there. We're getting something out of the sun, but not everything. And so, we add some electrons then, but that's like the backup plan, not the going forward plan. And
sure.
We can talk about it really easily. This is in the classroom in front of them. But then we start talking about our electric infrastructure. I think, why don't we just go full in? Wind, solar, hydro, everything. If we don't make it all the way, we'll sprinkle in some fossil fuels. So, I mean, things like this are a really approachable beginning to that conversation, which is a much more important, broader sort of mindset shift that I hope we see going forward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I just think so often we get hung up in perfection, that we need to just never use plastic and we need to buy completely plant-based foods, and and I think that gets in the way sometimes of just doing the things that are logical. Just bring a set of utensils along with you and say no to single-use utensils, because those things aren't going to be recycled. You're going to use them once and throw them away, but a piece of plastic gets used over and over. It's not really the demon.
Yeah, and I think plastic has been kind of a runaway train, but now with the Pacific Gyre and all these countries that are seeing it, the river is now all plastic by the time it ends up in the Indian Ocean or whatever. That's starting to change.
It's raising literacy.
Yeah. So slow down that train anyway.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some easy ways to do it. I mean, some simple things that we, you go to the produce market or the produce section of the grocery store even, and there's fruit that's already pre-packaged by nature that we then put in a plastic container. That's pretty easy. We just get rid of that bag or hard plastic clamshell or something. And
there was a PSA in, I think it was like the late 60s. I remember when I was a kid, of this guy with a bulldozer, and he's bulldozing trees or whatever, and then he turns off the bulldozer for his lunch, opens up the lunch bucket, pulls out this box, opens the box, it's a plastic wrap thing. By the time he's taken 6 or 7 layers out, what does he pull out? An apple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, garlic is one of my examples, because it comes out of the ground shelf stable. It thing will sit on your shelf forever.
Yes.
But what do? We take it and we mush it and chop it in the garlic factory, and we put it in some chemical, whatever, and
Yeah.
oil probably, in a plastic container that we package, and now we have to heat treat it, so then, to make sure that it's shelf stable because we got rid of its natural package and ship it around the world. So, I mean, things like that, those are the easy things to me. I did a TED Talk a while ago about a potato. Same thing.
Yeah.
Comes out of the ground, shelf stable,
Yes.
and then we chop it and chemically process it, put it in a plastic bag, freeze it, and we have to keep it frozen. It's like, these are the things that are easy. It takes a minute to dice a potato, and so.
Do you have your students like bring their own food to cook or anything
No,
like that?
no. So mainly the cooking part is demo based.
Sure.
It's been a really interesting thing that's happened with COVID, is that I had to transition. Last summer I also teach a course on the physics of food and cooking, and I was teaching that last summer. And so we usually do a lot of demos in class, and I thought, how in the world am I going to do this thing remotely, online or Zoom or whatever. So I had to transition this course to summer all of a sudden, and didn't know how I was going to do it. So I asked my students to each purchase a couple things, lab-like equipment for their own home kitchen. So a standalone burner that plugs into a power meter, and we had infrared thermometers and oven thermometers and scale, whatever. So what we did then is I cooked at home. We planned what we were going to cook. I gave them the ingredient list a week ahead of time. They could procure the ingredients. We all cooked in our homes. It actually ended up so much better than in the classroom for several reasons. For one, everyone's cooking at the same time, and we're on Zoom. It's not quite as great when you're right next to each other, but it was good. But then everyone's taking data. And everyone's using something a little different, right? So someone has an induction cooktop, and someone else has a radiant cooktop, and someone else has an electric resistant cooktop. Sure. Well, now we're cooking the same thing with these three things, and you can very clearly see the divisions of efficiency. Induction was crazy efficient, right? Sure. Compared to the other. So it was an unexpected positive that came out of it. So that's really how I'm teaching. That class only teaches in the summer. And so I think I will always now make it an online course, because students can have their summer jobs and whatever also. And today's Wednesday, we're cooking frittatas. So so everyone's.
That's one of Joe's.
Yeah, and so we'll talk about the sourcing. And I mean, our food system, this solar oven thing is also a great way to initiate a conversation about the global food system. For 1 calorie that we consume in the United States, 10 calories of fossil fuel energy goes into the creation of it. So, I mean, clearly that's like unsustainable by definition. So, this helps students kind of like start to have that conversation too, which I think is really important. So.
Sure. And you have a website.
I do.
No Watts Cooking.
No as in knowledge, Watts as in power. Yes. KNOWWATTS. I know it's not the best. Yep. And then cooking. No. So try to keep a blog there when I have time to do so, and add some content there. Yeah.
Well, and Google Carla Ramsdell, Ramsdell.
Correct.
Yep, Appalachian State University. That's a Minnesota thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. We have different names for these mountains.
There we go. And you'll find TED Talk.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk, and her website, and obviously the university work that you're doing. So the kids eventually they look at the cookers. They have a little bit of at least talk about the design and so forth?
Yes, yeah. So that would be more in the physics of food and cooking class, non-COVID days. I would just sort of bring a sampling of all the ovens out to a place like this, preferably on a sunny day. And people can really, I'd bring some cookie dough, maybe some sweet potato fries or something, and really let them experience the ovens, and load them plenty of hot pads and things like that. And I think it's a good introduction to the possibilities.
Sure.
And then, people come to Appalachian for sustainability, but also because it's the great outdoors. It's a beautiful place. A lot of people are backpackers and that kind of thing, even car campers. And so these, also offer these great opportunities for people that are traveling across I had a student last semester who was planning a cross-country pilgrimage and was concerned about how she was going to cook and what food she should bring along, and so was very seriously considering like the Go Sun Go. It's only the two of them, small enough where that could happen. It's very portable. Open it up and can be cooking without having to purchase fuel along the way. And so,
Well, our millions of viewers, or maybe 1 dozen viewers, I don't know how many viewers can't smell it, but you smell the granola. The wind is blowing probably away from you, but it is already cooking in there, and I would guess pretty close to this time you'd start to smell it cooking with just the solar, right? With just the sun.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if we had abundant sun, definitely before now. Yeah, we would. Yeah, you got a good bit of the cinnamon making its way out of there. So, yeah. I mean, this is, it's another good conversation to have in a classroom. Also, about does it make sense? So this is GoSun's battery pack, and it could be charged with a PV solar panel also, right? And so as an energy engineer, part of me thinks, does it make sense to take the solar energy, which is heat, right, and then convert it to electrons in a solar panel to charge a battery to then convert it back to heat? Like, it's like the energy transfer doesn't sound like a really intelligent choice, especially because of photovoltaic panels in the teens efficiency, right? So 80% of the energy is lost in that conversion. And so, as an energy engineer, that doesn't make sense. But thermal efficiency is not the only metric, right? And so sometimes as students and as future, as they go into these careers in renewable energy, we need to think beyond just what's the most efficient thing. That's a huge factor, but also you have to figure, when I get home at night and I want to cook, it's too late to cook on a solar oven. If I had a PV panel charging a battery all day and then I'm able to plug that in and cook at night, does that make sense? Well, it sounds like it makes more sense than turning my oven on anyway. So it helps to broaden the conversation just beyond, in a physics world, we just look so often at thermal efficiency, and there's other factors.
Bring it up is I remember when in the 91, 92 Soviet Union's collapsing in Russia, basically Russia said, our landline phone system was for crap to begin with, so let's just go right to cell phone towers. So let's just jump to that next. And with all these developing countries where there is no grid yet, or it doesn't reach them, if they're already saying, well, let's get panels so we don't have to worry about that, well, then we have that as an option.
That's right.
So exactly. I think of it as, every time you water the garden, well, some of that water sprays away. I mean, you lose no matter what. You can't get 100%. But
I love the analogy you make, because I'm a gen ed teacher for the most part. I teach people who think that physics is going to be this awful experience and try to make it pleasant. And so I put things in less numerical terms sometimes. So I think of efficiency as what you get over what you pay for. Yes. So basically it's like, well, what's the purpose of this thing? So if we're looking at electricity, for example, what you get is the flow of electrons, and what you pay for in a traditional plant is the fuel. But now, you look at a PV panel, it's still what you get over what you pay for, but you're not really paying for it now because it's solar energy. Yep. So now your efficiency is less about fuel and more about square footage. Yep. We have to look also at the total energy that it took to make that solar panel, right? And to make sure that we are utilizing it enough. Those are precious electrons that come off of that. Yep. And that took a lot of energy and resources to make that solar panel, to make this battery, and make sure that we're really utilizing those, in the full extent that they're possible. So in any of the renewable energy efficient world that we do, is that the first step, before we ever talk about how we're going to power it, what fuel source, is how efficient it is, right? And so again, the fusion or any of these evacuated tubes are a rock star there. We'll talk about how we're going to power it later. Let's first make sure we're doing things as intelligently as possible, right? And the evacuated tube that's why it's so great in a regular physics classroom. It's a heat transfer genius, right? So we evacuate the gap between the two, so we basically get rid of loss due to conduction and convection, because they need a medium, and there's no medium between the two walls of this. Yep. And then we tune the layer, the inner tube's outer coating, we tune to make sure that it absorbs the sun's radiation, short wavelength, high energy, very well, but it's not as good at emitting the oven's radiation, right? Sure. So we try to keep as much of the radiant energy in as well. So that's good. Like, check the box. We've done things as efficiently as possible. Now let's talk about how we're going to add the energy that we need. And so we're going to maximize the renewables and trickle in the other stuff. So again, it's a good conversation that can be transposed to buildings, to the electric grid, to our transportation system, and just make sure we do things efficiently first, and then talk about the fuel. We have a group here in our K through 12 that does a science buddies, that's what it's called, where they pair like a kindergarten or first grader up with an eighth grader. And so I've visited a couple of those, and one of the Science Buddies curriculum is all around solar ovens. So they make their own out of a shoebox or a pizza box or something over several weeks. Katie Matthews is a teacher at Valley Crucis that's developed this curriculum that's pretty cool. And then I've come in like on the last day when they're testing with these ovens, you know. So I mean, the perfect thing to cook in those kind of ovens is like a s'more. Because you can't go bad. You're not gonna you're not gonna hurt anybody because something's not cooked. You don't need a whole lot to soften a marshmallow or melt chocolate. Yeah, but then I can bring like, you know, some real stuff here and cook real cookies and that kind of thing. Yeah. So on the heels of learning how to transition this other cooking class online, we're now developing cooking classes that are all going to be by Zoom for food insecure students. So the Office of Sustainability here has been a rock star, very supportive of my work all along as well, and they're now helping me develop these. They run a food pantry for food insecure students, and so we're going to have kind of Blue Apron style where the students come and pick up this packet of ingredients, and then I'll from my my cooking space, they'll all be in their individual cookings by Zoom. We'll cook like a lentil taco, something they may never have tried because lentils seem really not that delicious. But if you make them right, they're pretty awesome. Or a skillet pizza, or things that are really easy, low cost, and then also work in a bunch of the sustainability cooking pieces as well. So I think the food system represents this really enormous opportunity. I think I consider myself a cooking evangelist, which is an odd term, but I think especially in the college years to really motivate students to try cooking. Doesn't have to be fancy, but I think it can definitely alleviate food insecurity because you can buy pretty inexpensive ingredients. And I think also students get climate anxiety, right? So we have a lot of climate change stuff. It certainly is a daunting thing that we're facing. I carry along with me the carbon dioxide curve over the last 800,000 years. And I think students might feel powerless. But when you introduce food and the enormous impact that food's having, food might be 30% of our greenhouse gases, it helps empower them, right? So now something they're doing 3 times a day, they have the opportunity to change in a way that's more helpful to the climate system. And I think that then leads to further bigger change, but it's a step everybody can take today in their kitchens to make a big difference.
And the economics piece, I know if someone would have shown me, you know, that Domino's pizza versus making my own pizza, you know, how it's like a quarter of the cost with all the trimmings.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And so they're in the college, they aren't quite cooking on their own yet, but boy, if they could switch, then they'll be rewarded.
Well, and I mean, I think Domino's is a good example. A frozen pizza is a good example because even then, you know, you're shrink wrapped in plastic in a cardboard box. Anything frozen's got to stay frozen through transportation, in the grocery store, in your freezer, you know. And this, I make this skillet pizza, it's on my blog as well, that never sees an oven. So you never heat an oven, and it honestly goes from the scoop of flour to a pizza on your plate faster than a frozen pizza. Sure. You know, it's not that hard. It's just, you just got to get over that.
Do you
just
ever
give it a try.
Bring in like the business? Is there business classes, business degrees here?
There are. We have a really good business program. I have not partnered with a business school. We have this collaborative on campus that's all these different people working in the sustainable food system from different lenses. We definitely help inform each other's work, and there is one member on there that's in accounting, so she kind of contributes to that pool.
The one, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. There's the lean manufacturing model.
Yes.
Yeah. The one they talk about the 4 or 6 or 8 types of waste, depending on which expert you talk to. And 7. And one of them is basically storage, warehousing.
Yeah.
Because if you're storing all your widgets in this factory, that's got to have lights on for the workers. It's got to have the electricity to run the robots, and it's heating if it's stuff that can't freeze.
Yeah.
And refrigeration if it can't get
right.
Well, you're talking with that frozen pizza. How long is that in the, you don't know. I mean, if they have the date stamped on it when it arrives.
Yeah.
When it was first frozen to the factory.
That's right.
And then the frozen, I mean, how much that adds to the cost.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah,
you're making me wonder now why I haven't tried a skillet pizza in a solar oven. I mean, that same recipe I have on it's just on a stovetop. It would, I'm going to do it. You've now motivated me to give it a try. I'll send you a picture of it. I'm sure it'll be great,
But I'll remember because I'll mention it now and it'll be on tape and I can't forget it.
Yeah, good.
In Portugal, there's Sarah Gilmerson. She's a chef from Sweden. She's in Malta now, but she was in Sweden in the 57th parallel. and she sells solar
Wow.
cookers and cooks fancy stuff in solars. And I asked her, could we come up with a list of solar cooking challenges, like recipes where it's, oh, you can't cook that in a solar cooker. It's like,
Yeah.
well, how many things do you cook where you use the stovetop
so
to sear and then you
cool.
put it in an oven? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's no different. There's, different uses for
Yeah.
different cookers. So we came up with a dozen or more.
Nice.
Like, and the big one, like talking about pizza, Neapolitan pizza, where, you want to have the 500, 600 degrees,
Yeah.
whatever. And do that in a box cooker is
Yeah,
going to be
not
really
gonna
a
get there,
challenge.
yeah.
But it might, because there's some insulations out there, like Stan Wells in California.
Okay.
He's developed a tracker, and he found this. It's for roofs, and it's a rock wool kind of a thing. So it doesn't sound like it has anything that would like off gas.
Yeah.
And it supposedly can get up there in the 500, 600.
Well, I've
degree
had
range,
the Sport up
Yeah.
incredibly hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the oven to me that I have the whole line of a lot of them, but there's something about I think the surface area to volume ratio of the Sport
Yes.
that's just perfect.
Yes.
And so I've even had it on cloudy days that it can cook. I've had it under a tent that I wasn't trying to cook, and it warmed up anyway. I
Sure,
mean, it's
sure.
just there, and I think I've gotten close to 500-ish at least in
wow.
there.
That's
Yeah,
that's
with an
the
infrared
The
thermometer.
Solar Sport?
The
Solar-
Go Sun.
Oh, the Go Sun Sport.
The
Sure,
Go
sure.
Sun Sport.
Parabolic,
Yeah.
Yep.
Down deep. So there's
Yeah.
definitely a thermal, what's it, from hot to cold.
Yep.
In there, so you often have to kind of switch trays
Sure.
or move the stuff that was at this side down to deep, because it's really down deep in the evacuated tube where it
Yeah.
gets super hot. But it's I think the pizza's gonna do great in
Yes,
there. I'm gonna
yes.
send you a picture. I'm
Yeah,
excited to
great.
give it a try. Yeah.
Sharon Clausen is doing biscottis.
Yeah.
In it because you have to cook it twice.
Yes.
You bake it and then you dry.
That's
you basically bake it
right.
dry.
One of my family
There we go.
favorites. I
There
make
you- I
my
was gonna
mom's
say.
biscotti recipe all the time.
Yep. Next
But
up.
it's biscotta.
Biscotta. Okay. The English corruption.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I don't say it so well either, but
Okay, so no, you talked about an event, and I'll switch a couple cameras around, or at least I'll just
Absolutely,
do this one where I can
sure.
say, well, this is the area where you mentioned an event.
Yeah, so once a year we said this is the Apple Fresh Collaborative. So it's a collaborative of faculty on campus who all work in the sustainable food realm from very different perspectives. We have someone from psychology, sustainable development, sustainable technology, business, as I said, and English and physics and chemistry. So we all kind of come together and try to improve literacy around the importance of a sustainable food system. So yeah, this Sanford Mall is transformed one day a year in the fall to a 100-yard long table, continuous table. We have locally sourced potatoes, also part of Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture, which is our high country, runs our high country food hub, so it helps to promote connecting our local farmers to the community, and so they provide the potatoes for this event. And also we have our food services cook some apple pies from some apples, and then student groups will host the table, so they'll bring the toppers for the
Sure.
potatoes. So we have this really wide range, and we try to educate on limiting packaging and limiting animal proteins, and so yeah, we fill this 100-yard long table with 400 or 500 people just eating a meal together. Try to talk about the importance of sustainable food. Sometimes we talk about football too. So
Sure. Hey,
whatever
why not?
happens
Why
to
not?
come up.
Yeah.
Just that event of gathering around a table, like that commensality, is a really important tradition that I think everybody just feels good, right?
Sure,
When you
sure.
gather around a table together. So it's become a huge Appalachian tradition. Unfortunately, COVID last year, we had to do it via Zoom. Did not have the
Not
same
quite.
feel.
Not quite,
So
no.
we're super excited to bring it back this
Sure.
coming fall.
But part of my background is in community organizing.
Yeah.
And one of the first things you learn is you get more buy-in from people if you discuss it over the breaking of bread.
Yeah,
And
so
when
true.
you bring it's too fundamental to
That's
pass
right.
up. I mean, you can have almost a mortal enemy at the other end of the table. You might actually
So true.
come to an agreement at
Yeah.
the end. The other item about events, I stumbled on a video of, I think it's in Bolivia, but it might have been Peru, I don't know, but it was Latin America, where they had a plaza with people with these box cookers on stilts. I think it was the Bolivian, the Sede Sol model is what it seemed like. And people are just kind of standing by them looking all nervous. Well, then someone comes by with a clipboard and they check the food, what's the temperature, how are you doing that right, do you have the reflector at the right angle, and it was like a contest. And everyone's going, yeah, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And one by one, and they pan across, and it had to be 50 or more. So events like that are huge.
Yeah, I think it's really true, and I think that's why I love this space I've stumbled into. Right, there's the energy and the physics part of it is really important, but there's so many secondary pieces about food and sort of bringing back a love of home cooking. The same thing. Once you gather a group of people together around frozen food, right? But you gather a group of people around a table of lovely prepared simple stuff. It just transforms the conversation. We have better community connectedness and family connectedness. Invite a friend over. I think our nutritional piece, the health improves as well. The energy drops. The budget, as we've talked about, food insecurity issues drop. So it's not just an environmental issue. I think it has such other impacts that are really it's exciting. So I love being in this space. That's my
I'm just wondering if we want to talk about a cooker or two.
Sure.
Yeah, and then.
Broken tube.
So we can actually.
Oh, sure. Oh, great.
Yeah. It kind of looks like really. It tells an important tale that it's actually also quite fragile. So where's a good place?
Yeah, that's good right there.
Is that
Perfect.
good? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so we can talk about evacuated tubes. This evacuated tube, unfortunately, came to the end of its useful life. At one point, I had students helping me transport stuff. I've broken them myself as well, too. It's not just students, but this gives us a good opportunity to see what an evacuated tube is all about. So we have these two concentric cylinders. Typically, when it's not broken, the space between them is evacuated again. So we pull out all the medium there, not all of it, most of it. So we can't really lose heat due to conduction or convection, like a vacuum sealed coffee mug or whatever. So the outside glass, borosilicate glass, that's low iron, so it lets all the radiation through to the inner surface. And this is an inner surface that is tuned so that it accepts radiation from the sun at that short wavelength, high energy. Inside, you see it's all coated with copper, so we have a really nice even distribution. Copper has a very good thermal conductivity, so it spreads that thermal energy evenly along the oven. And then the oven heats, and then the surface also is not so great at emitting or radiating the energy of the oven, which is at obviously a much lower temperature than the sun. And so I think it's just a good demonstration that, first of all, it is kind of fragile. Also, so you have to be really careful about transporting them. I've broken more than one in all the days that I'm always shuffling them around places. So thankfully, a lot of these places provide a replacement tube for a pretty good cost. This is also kind of interesting. So you see how it's gotten all foggy inside there. So that ring there is actually intended to indicate when the vacuum has been broken. So all evacuated, this one you can't see, but most evacuated tubes, this one also in that tip, has that little ring there, and that's just intended that when air is in contact with the ring, it produces this white cloudiness so that somehow the vacuum was compromised. So,
sure.
I do know from testing multiple evacuated tubes especially, that they're not all created equal for whatever reason, right? I've had two side by side, and one can do 3 batches of cookies in the time the other one takes to do one. So whether it's the evacuation or this coating, or I'm not really sure what is the difference, but they're not all the same. So
sure. I don't know if you had a chance to catch many of my videos from last fall, but Gordy Bishop in Barstow, California, 35 years in the solar thermal electric, as in those big long tubes, and the vacuum with the metal with oil in them.
Yes.
And
so it just has a header that the water goes through.
And he showed me one that was at a trade show that was pretty similar to what they had, where it's they can unvacuum it if they have to replace the metal.
Okay.
And then they have a valve where they can re-draw out all the air.
Oh, interesting.
And so forth. And he's proposing that rather than this, like the exterior borosilicate is probably tougher than the interior one.
Okay.
And then with the metal inside, you just allow for enough expansion of that metal, so you don't have that hit the glass and crack up the whole thing.
Right.
Highly recommend it, because he talks about the detail of it. He was in the business big time.
I will definitely look at it.
And he talks about how it was a solar thermal to generate electricity, generate the steam for electricity.
Yes, right.
And he got into solar cooking because one day he was in a kind of a break room that had one of these tubes without the glass, or 2 or 3 of them going, where they just put a grill on top and they're cooking on that inside. And
Yeah, that's
so he
fabulous.
was saying it dawned on him, it was made in the shade but cooked with the sun.
Yeah.
So that's the title of his video.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's a little insert in the middle of his talking about, because he
Yeah.
uses vacuum tubes and.
Well, I think
and,
Patrick Sherwin also, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he have his aha moment installing?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good point. These, neither of these, but evacuated tubes originally were intended for
Yes.
domestic hot water,
Yeah.
right? Or hot
Yeah.
water in homes, which is another good segue for students in my classroom. We also
Yeah.
talk about heating of water, so we can obviously do it with a boiler, but we also can do it with a flat plate heater or an evacuated tube, and it's not always clear which is the more efficient mechanism. So for them to see evacuated tubes,
Sure.
you're right, you just put a copper tube in there that has recirculating medium that brings it to a header and heats the water to your home. So also brilliant. I think we see a lot more of them in other countries than we see here, unfortunately.
Well, and England, the Solar Cooking UK Facebook,
Okay.
they have set up what they call the McTilty, which is basically 3 or 4 of these vacuum tubes
Great.
with the kind of semi-parabolic reflector at the bottom, then just flat and with little nudges of
Interesting.
parabolic. And they just feel it's the way to go there. They promote that the most, because a day like today, maybe longer, but if like I say, if you can make out the disk of the sun behind the overcast, this will probably do
will,
it.
yeah.
Maybe twice as long, but
Right.
you'll still do it.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's right.
yeah, big proponents of that.
Yeah, and then you bring up another point too, that also, concentrated solar is being used in traditional power plants.
Yes.
So rather than, most power plants use the Rankine cycle, which basically we're just boiling water to make steam and then running steam through a steam turbine. So we use coal or propane or something to boil the water, but there are now both point focus and line focus lenses that are replacing the coal with these reflectors. And again, that's a great example of let's go for it. They don't always get us all the way there, and so sometimes there's a backup boiler also that uses coal, but that's fine. Let's get everything we can get out of the sun, and then if it doesn't get us all the way there, we need to turn on the boiler for a little bit to get us up over the edge, to get us the pressure we want or whatever. Great.
Sure.
But we've started with the renewable first. So there's a lot of movement in that direction as well, which kind of, you can use the existing infrastructure. Then also we have these power plants that are out there anyway. Just pull out the boiler and pull in a reflector or lens or something to concentrate the sun. So lots of opportunities. It's exciting to see this transition.
Yep. I see one that's kind of a teapot type thing up there. I actually got one of those.
Love these.
Yeah, I haven't used it yet, but
don't know if this is happening today with our cloudy conditions, but my thinking was if you wanted some tea this morning, we could make a cup of tea. But yeah, we definitely are. I brought an infrared thermometer, but it has no battery. But we definitely heat it so we can fill this. I love the design of this. It's really brilliant. So for one, we have a really easy, if we build up too much steam in there, we're going to have this release valve, which is going to let the steam out, so we don't have sort of danger of shattering in this thermos, which is nice. And then additionally, I just think it's really well designed, right? It's easy to sort of take along with you. Sure. And then when you get where you're going, the reflectors kind of part and they just sort of become the reflectors. So again, evacuated tubes, it really doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to do a lot of the work just by being out in the sun. The reflectors don't have to. I doubt that's a perfect parabola, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes.
I don't think these reflectors are perfect, but you don't really have to. Off with a go. Another great example. These are clearly not perfectly parabolic, also not perfect reflectors. This oven works so well, right? Because again, the evacuated tube is so efficient. So going back to let's start with doing something that makes sense and then add fuel to it later. So, and the Go Sun Go is also
Okay, is that a sun flare?
That's a sun flare, yeah. Maybe an example for students also of that first step of the process, making something as efficient as possible. Clearly the insulation isn't as robust at all, even as a sun oven. But it's very portable. It's quite inexpensive. I've melted cheese for a quesadilla. I have cooked pasta. Water never came to a boil, but I got the water hot enough to cook. And it's genuinely, this comes apart. Like you could put this on a kayak even, right? If you're floating down the New River here in our beautiful Appalachian Mountains, this just folds up. Let's see, let me get this right. Like this first and then like this. Right, like I just, so it actually has a little bag, super compact and portable. So again, the thermal efficiency isn't great, but sometimes that's not the only metric or not the thing that's most important. So So it's kind of fun. So just a little sampling of possibilities. And then at the end there, I'm going to go through the solar espresso maker. Yeah.
Okay, well now we're into cute.
So yeah, I love this thing so much. So often I'm doing these outreach events, so I'm really looking for things that are portable, and a lot of these big dishes are, it's tough to transport them around, so I found this and fell in love with it. A little espresso maker. We genuinely don't have enough sun today to make this happen, but yeah, this just goes in the focal point right there. I can actually catch a piece of paper on fire within this parabola when the sun is shining, so really good on concentration. You know, I think it's interesting, we talk about these different metrics we need to address when talking about, you know, thermal efficiency isn't the only thing that's important. There was a study that was done in Africa or something that sort of tested different solar cooking strategies and found that actually this, on a larger scale, where you put actually a pot and the focal point, was more effective at adoption than something like an evacuated tube. Evacuated tube clearly more efficient, but that's like culturally, what they were doing before was cooking on a 3-stone fire. You could genuinely just pull out the 3-stone fire and put in a reflector. All the cooking utensils, all the recipes, pots and pans stayed the same, and so that it wasn't such a cultural step to try to figure out how do I make rice and beans in an evacuated tube. So that's one of the things I think about these that are really, really attractive, right? Is that you kind of can just keep doing what you've done before and use, not, this is really a small example. They come much larger, obviously, but that's, yeah, I think that's an interesting point as well that we have to look at. I think in the United States, this solar cooking thing is phenomenal. I would encourage people to go down this road, right? It's fun. It actually, it's great for emergency preparation. Is it going to move the needle of our energy consumption? Not. But if we look at third world countries that are deforesting, if we look at refugee camps, those kind of places, you know, I think we see a lot of real opportunity where you don't need to purchase any fuel and you can really, you know, you have typically really great radiant environments. And so we're working a little bit with Wine to Water, who's a local nonprofit, and I talked about we were doing this research project to try to look at solar water pasteurization strategies in countries that are resource limited. And you know, coming at this project from a physicist, the first thing we did was just totally overthink it, right? And we had thermometers and valves and we had pumps and lots of reflectors and all this stuff to try to say, well, I want something I can leave out in the sun and it fills an evacuated tube, and when it gets to pasteurization temperature, it dumps it into another basket and fills in us. There's all these controls and PV panels. It was crazy. So the Wine to Water person first comes, super polite, wonderful human. He's like, yeah, like that's just not going to probably fly. And the other important thing that he brought to our understanding was that a reflector in a place that's resource limited may be more valuable as a mirror than it is as a solar reflector. So they may go missing, right? So he kind of challenged us to say, is there a way you can run an evacuated tube, for example, without a reflector? So we're looking at Fresnel lens, you know, because they would be less likely to be attractive for other purposes.
Sure.
So it's a small project. We're hoping to publish this coming fall the results of that lens versus reflector. Is actually pretty interesting. Sustainability has the larger one that's always sort of set up.
Sure.
But then also there's the portable one of these two that kind of comes apart in pieces and goes in a backpack. Have you seen
the segmented?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, Soul Source. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is in and we've got that. We've got the Soul Source, the original.
Yeah, the Soul Source.
Yep, and then the Sport. Do they call it the Sport?
They might call it the Sport
green
also,
one
that comes apart.
Yeah, with the green. Yeah,
but I find that those are really, I don't know if you find this too, they're really dependent upon wind.
Yeah,
so if you have a really windy day, you lose as much through convection as you're gaining by radiation, and you're kind of playing. If it's a really stagnant sunny day, they're really good.
Well, what are the long-term plans for promoting it? Even on a personal level, are you, like I do go to a farmer's market in the Kingfield neighborhood, it's like 6-8 blocks south of us, and I picked up a Son Oven Villager last fall.
Okay.
It's that 50 loaves of bread at a time thing.
Yeah, trailer.
Yeah,
oh yeah, no, this is like I don't need anything more in my collection,
No,
and also
definitely.
I can't afford to buy anything more in my collection. Not for a while. I got to save up.
I think long term, I would like to continue to promote this. So we also have this. The High Country Food Hub is our online farmers market. So it's a food hub. You go on, you order food once a week. You pick up. It's part of Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture's work, and so we'll
Sure.
plans to set up something so as customers come and pick up, they see me cooking something that was available there. It's just kind of broadening people's understanding that this technology is not only available but really works really well. Again, I think for emergency situations it's a really good thing to have on hand. It's super fun on top of everything else. I hope to keep working with Wine to Water to talk about when these solar ovens can be most useful, both for water pasteurization and also for cooking in resource limited places. I think that's really where it could have the biggest impact, for sure. And I just look forward to seeing where these companies take this technology. I always think like, oh, that's great, that's it, they figured it out, and then a year later, 2 years later, there's something else. It's like, okay, I got to find a grant now to purchase this one because it looks even more amazing. So the evolution has been really fun to watch, and I look forward to continuing to watch it and seeing also how they inform each other. How as we said, evacuated tubes originally were for domestic hot water. And I think there's maybe a give and take that's happening there as this industry develops. They inform the other and vice versa, and so there's going to be kind of this collaborative movement forward. And so, I hope we continue to see a lot of work in this area and distributing it to the people that maybe really need it also. So. Now, the other thing I just thought about too, long ago, so again, Appalachian State has been like sustainable before it was cool to be sustainable. So Dennis Scanlon's a faculty member in what is now sustainable technology in the built environment, and he developed a solar dehydrator that you've, I'm sure, seen, because it's the one that I think Mother Earth News picked it up at one point. So it all can be cut out of one 4x8 sheet of plywood.
That's probably what Joe's dad made.
Yeah, my dad made one.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. So we have a research farm, and I saw them out there the other day. They're making these, or cooking, or growing peppers, and then throwing the peppers in there to dehydrate them. So it's just a bunch of shelves that you unload from the back end. So yeah, it all came from Appalachian State. So we been into these kind of things for a long time. So I'm happy to be part of that tradition.
The last question is always, are you willing to have your contact info shared for people that want to expand on this kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
Riff on it?
nomadscooking.com and my email address. You have 2 different email addresses. Absolutely.
We'll plug that in.
I love being in conversation with people about